All right, good morning.
Good morning.
This our second meeting of 2022.
Hey guys.
And Gordon, take it away. Oh, wait a minute. I need to introduce one other thing. We have new members with us, Ron Riddle and his wife, Teresa. They are from Southwest Florida,
Port
about as
Star.
far down as you can go and not get in the Gulf or the ocean. And they are here in the 30-day. Take a look and see if you don't think we're all crazy. 30 days, join us. So that's where they are. Okay, Gordon.
Well, guys, first of all, I want to say it's great to be back. I'm sorry I missed December. I think I missed all of December. I maybe caught one, but either way, it's great to see all of you. Little nostalgic. If everyone could mute, if you could, and then at the end, we could take some questions. Or if you need to interrupt me in the middle, just let me know. I don't mind that at all. But good to see everyone. I'd say last year was a blast. I mean, I've really enjoyed working with Tom and Landon. Nancy and I have become friends, and Mari as well. Mari was gracious enough to ask us to do some promotion for his book, which has been a blast to read it and to promote it. But for all of you guys, I'm excited about 2022. I'm a New Year's kind of person. I love goal setting and the kind of thing, and so it's good to get in here and talk with you guys. Today's talk is going to be less publishing specific. I'll be happy to answer any questions along those lines. But since we are in a new year, and I used to always tell my congregation, God doesn't turn the calendar, but we do. So since we turn the calendar and we mark our days by sunrise and sunset, it's not bad to evaluate your new year. And so I want to talk a little bit. Nancy asked for a title, and I'm going to call this Shifting. So as I'm apt to do, I'd like to tell you a little bit of a long story, but I have an hour, so I think we're going to be okay. And again, anyone feel free to interrupt me if you've got thoughts or questions. But I want to tell you a little bit of my story that you may or may not know, and then move into some practicality. So I'd like to start the story in 2012. In 2012, my wife Amy and I were living in a town called Garner, North Carolina, which is a suburb of Raleigh. And we had moved there to plant a church, and we had been there for 7 years. And great church. It's what's called a scratch plant. That's when you start with nobody. You start from scratch. Some people call that a parachute plant. And so because of that, I was bivocational, and so I was planting a church, and I was marketing and consulting, and doing whichever one required the most at the moment to lead the church and then also eat. And it was April of that year, and Amy and the girls and I had gotten away on a rare vacation. And I received a phone call that day from my sister. I'm the youngest of five, to let me know that my father had passed away. I had a wonderful relationship with my father. Just he was a super encourager to me. He was a pastor as well, and he had terrible health for most everything. If you name it, he had it. And he'd gone in for a routine health procedure and just not survived it. And so, as you can imagine, that how that hit me, and just we were out of town, and so I was trying to process grieving and how do we leave vacation and go home. And right after that phone call from my sister, I received another phone call, and just bleary eyed, I just picked it up. And it was a pastor up in Fredericksburg, Virginia, where I live now, who I had known. And he just said, "Hey, Gordon, I'm calling. We're going to get right to the point. I'd like for you to come to Fredericksburg to plant a church." And I just said, "Doug, thank you. It's a very kind offer. I've never thought about leaving my church, never thought about planting another church. But on top of that, my father just died, and I'm just not really in a place. But I want to say thank you very much. It's a kind offer." So my father passed, and funerals, all the things that go around that. But Doug was gracious. Actually, a couple of people from here actually went to my father's funeral, which meant a lot to me because I didn't know them. And over the course of the next 4 months, they asked me to do a few things, put together a church plant proposal, which is like a 3-year business plan. And Amy and I did that because we wanted to help them out. It's rejuvenating for us, but wasn't really pursuing the church at all. But over the course of the few months and prayer and a few things like that, we really felt like finally the church I had planted would do better with a new voice and a new vision, and we would plant a church up here in Fredericksburg. My primary concern was my mother. I mean, they had been married 52 years. I mean, she got married July right out of high school in June in 1955, and super incredible woman. And we wanted to meet with her and make sure she'd be okay. I mean, I had siblings in the area. So this is August of 2012. It's on a Tuesday, and Amy and I have lunch with her. And so we told her, we said, hey, Mom, I really think this is something we want to do. We think it's what God has called us to. And Mom, being the cheerleader that she always was, said, you know what? I think it'll be perfect for you guys. You guys should go. I'm going to be fine. And that was on a Tuesday. And then on that Friday, my mother got in a car crash and passed away. Now, a couple of things. There were a couple of mercies about that. One, my mom didn't suffer. And two, she was honestly trying to figure out, how do you do day in and day out life after being married to my dad so long. So it was an element of that where we felt freed up to come do what we're doing now. But as you can imagine, I mean, losing both parents in 4 months, both unexpectedly, I mean, again, you just imagine what we're going through. And I've got 3 small daughters at that time, and we're reeling. We're also trying to, how do you sell a house and move up here and plant a church and do all this? So as you imagine, almost every stress indicator you could have, we were pinging. And November, December of that year, I began having pauses. And what I mean by that is I'd be in a conversation with you, and then all of a sudden, I would just go inert for a period of time. And I'm partially aware that it's happening, and it began to happen more and more often. And so we went to go see a doctor and told the doctor what was going on. And he asked, well, are you under any stress? And I was like, well, yes, both my parents died. I'm moving. I'm trying to raise money. I'm trying to sell a house, And he said, well, I think it'd be best if you could reduce stress in your life. And that's wonderful advice. Like, thank you. And I'm not upset with him, but it's exactly what I would tell someone, but it was also somewhat comical. But we did it. We made it up to Fredericksburg, Virginia. In fact, today is 9 years ago today we made that move. And so we got up here. We're meeting with folks to plant the church. I'm still working a second job doing the marketing and consulting that I do. But these pauses continue and they grow worse. They get longer and more frequent. In fact, I had one driving, which is terrifying. And I had one running, and I'm preaching one Sunday, and I had one in the midst of a sermon. Now, this is somewhat comical. Everyone thought I just got caught up, like the Spirit had just got me. I mean, like just one of those moments I'm having, I'm having whatever I'm having. And finally, at the end of the sermon, there was a doctor in the crowd, and he came up to me and he said, Gordon, you just had a seizure. And I thought seizures what you thought a stereotypical seizure was, grand mal, and I had seen one before. And he was like, no, you had what's called a silent seizure or what's called a partial complex seizure. And he hooked me up with a neurologist. And the neurologist did all the exams and the CAT scans and all the stuff you do. And he said, yes, you have brain damage in your left frontal lobe. And I shared with him some injuries that I'd had as a child, and the stress triggered that injury that had always been there. The brain's so mysterious. And I went through a multi-year cycle of trying to find the right med to make this stop. So basically, my brains were scrambled for a couple of years. And even to this day, I still have them. The meds just lower the ceiling of their effect, because the only way to fix the brain damage is to have a lobotomy, which he threatened me with if I didn't undergo some health changes. And guys, in 2012, I ran 3 marathons. I thought I was the healthiest person in the world. And I couldn't run a mile. I couldn't go through an entire day without going to sleep. Now, let me hop, skip, and a jump for you. That was 2013. In 2014, my dear mentor, Terry Traylor, the guy who got me into ministry, I had lunch with him one day, and the very next day, he died of a heart attack on a treadmill. I literally fell to the floor when I found this out. I mean, he truly was Superman to me. And next to my father, the most influential person in my life. Let's hop and skip to 2015. Hang in there, guys. There really is light at the end of this tunnel, I promise you. 2015, Amy, my wife, is diagnosed with thyroid cancer, and so she needs to have the thyroid removed. We have that scheduled for December 30th, because if you don't get it in by the end of the year, insurance doesn't cover it. You know that game, right? So we go home to see Amy's father, and Amy's father was a minister, a wonderful mentor to me as well. On Christmas morning, 5 days before surgery, he passes away. Mom calls me. I called Amy's mom. She's like, come up here. And so through the wonderful skills I learned at summer camp, Jack is revived. and so you can imagine Christmas Day, paramedics are bringing, they're getting Jack out of there. You got kids, what a mess, right? And so he goes into the hospital for a week, but we've got to go have cancer removal surgery. And so Amy has surgery on the 30th, and then on the 31st, Jack passes away. So, we're in this receiving line. Amy can't speak. She's got bandages. Now, I'm not Job. I don't mean to tell you the story to make you shake your head, but we went through a 30-month period where both parents died. My mentor died. Amy's father died. Amy had cancer, and I'm planting a church, running a business, and trying to get my brain back, right? Many of us in this story, since Tom likes to point out how old we all are, many of us know those seasons of life. Some to more degree of severity than mine, and some of you, can think of moments where you really, your faith is questioned, and you might say, well, God, if you're teaching me a lesson, please let me know what it is. Or if you're not going to tempt me beyond my capacity, I think we've hit the capacity. We've had those conversations with God, right? Now, none of the survival on my part would have been possible without my wonderful wife and my faith in God. My faith in God was not in question by I truly know that Ephesians calls faith a gift, and it truly was. I had plenty of questions for God, but I didn't doubt his goodness and his salvation. And another blessing is I had a great relationship with both my parents and Jack. When they died, I didn't have unresolved issues, and I know those things are rare. Losing Terry was tough. Like my mentor, that just didn't see it coming. He wasn't old enough. But my family, my daughters and Amy and I, our life is pretty much marked by those 30 months. I have plenty of other markers in my life, when I went to seminary, or when I started my company or graduate. All of us have those markers, but we all look at those 30 months it's pretty much when, life went in one direction and then hung a left. And all of us have had tragedy, but since 2015, things have calmed down a little bit. I'm pretty thankful for that. So I share you that story, not for any sense of pat in the back of my own, but I want to talk about some very practical things that I learned during that time period that I think actually have application for all of us. Because we do hit those moments in our lives where if we don't shift or pivot, life is going to completely run over us. If we don't shift or pivot, we truly are going to struggle with our faith in God. If we don't shift and pivot, the goals we have, the book's not going to get written, a relationship's going to be damaged. And out of that moment, there were really three things that I learned that I think are fair and decent advice, at least from me, and that I hope would be helpful to you. This next step is not going to be necessarily very, it's not going to be very biblical specific. We're sitting here as people who profess faith in Christ, and so I'm not preaching 3 points that all begin with R that have a Bible verse attached. I'm not going to do that right now, though I've always got that Southern Baptist sermon in me. My dad taught me to do that. But I do want to talk about just a couple of very practical tips, especially as we approach the new year. So the first is this one, and it's going to sound incredibly obvious, but for some of us, it's going to be incredibly difficult. And the first one is we have got to learn to ask for help. I am a wonderfully self-sufficient person. I love me. I really do. I'm a big fan of me. I think that, I think you give me a challenge. I'm pretty confident that I can figure it out. And up until this period of time, I wasn't anyone quick to ask for help. I know that the root of that is pride. and there's a measure of self-righteousness in there. But I was really brought to the point that I was not going to be able to function without asking for help. There was a lot of things I had to ask for. You know, in planting the church, there's a lot of areas where the pastor casts a vision and does a lot of things to set by example, but there were a lot of things I couldn't even do. You know, some of those early Bible studies I wanted to lead, I couldn't even answer a question. I can't believe it's by God's grace that church even started. Always is, but in this case, in this circumstance. But I had to be broken of that pride and just flat out ask for help in some very practical things. And I know for us, you guys are all talented people. And you're part of this group, which means that you recognize to some extent the need for help. But we weren't designed in any way to function without asking for help. The church is a body, and one part hurts, another part hurts, and one helps. And we know that passage from 1 Corinthians. We've honestly got to be able to go to people and just say, I can't do this. Can you help me? You know, when Amy had that surgery and her father passed, my church really showed it's working. And when we got home, someone had gone into our house, cleaned it top to bottom, packed up all of our Christmas decorations and put them away. There's nothing more humbling than someone coming into your house and cleaning your toilet. I'm just going to tell you that. And when you've got 3 children and you left to go on you've gone to Christmas, and then you've gone to the hospital, and then you've gone to go to a funeral, there's no chance for you to get your house together before you get company. You know what I'm talking about? Like, we left it in the storm that it was. And they came in because someone called me and said, here's what we want to do. We want to clean your house and put up your decorations. We just need a key. And I'm telling you, folks, as wonderful as that sounded, it was very hard for me to accept. But finally, I just had to say, that would be amazing. That would be amazing. And so in the midst of that period, I think God shaped us in many ways to say, I got to just become a person who can ask for help. And when help's offered, that's God using someone in our lives to say, you know what, that would be great. I mean, it's obviously there's discernment about who we ask and who we allow in our lives, of course. But it was a period of time where I just had to finally say, I need some help. So that would be one. It's very simple. And 2 would be mentorship and coaching. Let me talk about the difference between the two, because there's a very big difference between the two. A mentor you don't pay for, and a coach you do. It's very different. A mentor is a person who is intimately willing to allow their lives to be open to you. They give you access to them. You give them access to your life, freedom to speak into it. Coaches are very wise people you reach out to with a contract. Say, hey, I need this for you. Can you give me this skill? Quite often, I'm willing to pay you for it. I have been blessed to have both in my life. With my father, my father-in-law, Terry, who passed away. But when Terry passed away, my father passed away, and my father-in-law passed away, I was left. There were no mentors left in my life. People who would be that committed to be open. And I wasn't foolish enough to think that I wouldn't do anymore. I needed a mentor. So in the meantime, what did I do? I went and paid for coaches. I mean, I couldn't, mentors you don't just go find them. You know, it's a progressive relationship. So I went out and got coaches. I got a church planting coach because I desperately needed one. I didn't have the money, but I paid for it anyway. But guess what I had to do? I went and asked for somebody to give me the money. I took point number 1, ask for someone, I need a coach. And they gave me the money, and I paid for coaching because I needed it. I didn't have those 3 pastors that I had depended on most of my life. And then over the progression of the relationships, I now have a new mentor. That person has taken me, well, it's been 9 years, but it's been 7 years. I mean, so about 2 years. That person that I trusted, they're godly. They're way smarter than I am. They're willing to share their mistakes with me. And that's so important. Good mentors tell you the mistakes they've made. That way you can make new mistakes and not the old ones. There's no need to repeat old mistakes. And mentors tell you, hey, here's a mistake. I was meeting with him just yesterday. And he said, Gordon, whatever endeavor you're taking, count on it being 3 times longer and 3 times more expensive than you planned. And that's gracious to hear when you're struggling and they go, yeah, it was 3 times longer and 3 times more expensive than I thought it was going to be. It goes to the first, asking for help. But coaching and mentorship is specific. It's very, very, coaches have defined places in your life. Teach me this thing. Show me how to do this thing. I'm going to ask certain things from you. That's why I'm willing to give you money. Mentors, just the whole life is opened up. Whole life. And we don't always have them. I've been blessed. I've been blessed. I thank God as often as I think about it, that my life has been marked by good mentorship. And it's, any of my faults are my own and not because of them, but many of the skills I have are because they've given it to me. So first one is asking for help. 2 is coaching and mentorship. And the third one is relentlessly pursue learning. I lead a lead share in our local chamber of commerce. It's a group of business people. And it's chair specific, which means there's one realtor, one doctor, one marketing, like you own that chair. So I'm there for the marketing. And I get to lead that lead share. We get together twice a month. We share leads with each other. We find out how we can refer to each other. But there's one thing that I do at each one of the meetings, and I say, hey, who's got a resource to share? Who has read something this week, video you've seen, a link you can share? And I'm always amazed that there's just not much. I don't mean that I love my lead share, but usually out of a group of 12, 14, there's only about 2 of us that will say, excuse me, I read this book this week and that kind of thing. And this is what I tell them, and I'm going to tell you guys the same thing. In a world of free information, ignorance is a choice. In a world of free information, ignorance is a choice. If you don't know how to change the wire on your weed eater, you go to YouTube, type in your weed eater, and there is some great dude and probably lady at this point in time who's going to teach you how to do it. And every summer, I have to do that again. I can never remember how to put new wire on my weed eater, but I go to that same guy, I've got it saved, and he shows me. Almost anything you need to know in a pinch, you can find online. There's a million free courses. Podcasts are ridiculous. Podcasts are my new Google. If I need to know something, I don't go to Google anymore. I just search it on the podcast and have someone tell it to me when I go for a run. We've got to become self-learners. And we've got to admit that much of what we don't know is because we just haven't pursued it. Now, I started with the first 2 because I think that's incredibly important. I started with asking for help and mentorship and coaching. You've got to have all 3 of these things. But gang, $22 for a book is a great investment. We've been spoiled a bit by Amazon because we want them cheap, but $24, $25 a book to get someone's life story, do it. Do it. You know, if find a podcast, you're like, oh, I never listened to them. Well, anything you want to know is probably on there. There's great free coaching classes online, but I just don't assume you don't need to keep learning. Again, Tom keeps telling us we're old on this place, but I'm telling you, I think the sign of age is when you choose not to keep learning. You want to slow down, don't exercise your brain. And I know that I can say that as a brain injury survivor. If you aren't exercising that brain, it is dying, folks. But really, there's so much out there. Get a book, get a library membership again. If you're not scared of germ on books, there's just so much out there. Now I get it. For me, I'm addicted to learning. You know, I love keeping that list of every book I read this year. I've got 20 podcasts I'm addicted to. You know, I get it. Part of it's my wiring, but you don't have to do all that. It's honestly just choosing to go out and learn. So let's make it writing specifics. While we're here, we're all authors, right? 1, ask for help. Every single person in this chat would be glad to get a message and say, hey, have you ever experienced this? Like, I'm having a formatting issue. Anybody would be glad to answer that question, right? If you've got a question about marketing, me, anybody else, we'll tell you what works and what doesn't work, right? I love picking on Mari. Mari's had some tremendous success in the last 3 months, but that dude has worked hard on that book. And you should get his book, read it. He gently reminded me to read it, and I've enjoyed it, and I can't wait to talk to him about it. But ask that dude what he's done to get where he's at, for real. Tom, you sold how many thousand copies? You have to chime in right now. How many thousands of copies? 4?
2,400.
That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. You know, I mean, there's so much here. We'll be glad to ask for help. Coaching. All right, we paid to be in this group. You're there. You know, you're there. But there's more intense coaching and mentors out there to be found. I am never shy to ask for coffee or lunch with someone. If I meet someone in the community and they're smarter than I am, which is a large number of the population, I'll just say, hey, can we get coffee? And then I just sit and learn. And guys, for real, if you don't know what you could be reading or listening to, then search YouTube or ask someone in this group what would be helpful, because there's so much free content out there. There really, really is. Let's not make ignorance our choice, or never complain, oh, I just don't know how to do that. Well, then find it. Find it. Find it through asking, mentorship, coaching, or just going on YouTube. So I really want to make this practical. I've got plenty more to say and plenty more stories to tell always, but let's pause right here. And you guys have thoughts or feedback or questions, you can ask me about my life, or you can ask me about my 3 points. I'm always happy, whatever you have. You guys have thoughts or feedback or questions?
I have a thought, Gordon.
Mm-hmm.
Well, multiple times I know I've asked you or Tom or Landon, Michelle for help on different things or to answer a question. And I mean, I think that's okay. But I can't tell you how many times when I want to know something in a day and I think of someone I can ask, I hear this little voice say, well, why don't you try to find it out yourself? If you can answer the question for yourself. It's kind of like when our parents used to say, like we'd ask how to spell a word and they'd say, go look it up in the dictionary. You know, it's like, go find it for yourself. And so that's something I've been trying to train myself is, you know what? You're right. I mean, there's Google, there's YouTube. I mean, I use YouTube for a lot of things, not just book ideas or, I mean, book help, but I just hear this little voice say, why don't you search it out for yourself? If you can answer the question for yourself, why do you have to go ask somebody? On the other hand, you know, I don't want to not ask any of you here because sometimes you just know stuff I don't know and you know how to do it and I can't find it. But I do think it's a really valid point that we try to teach ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks, Nancy. It's a combination of both, right? I mean, I put asking for help first, because if I said go be a self-learner first, that's what you guys would take away, and you would not be inclined to ask for help or get a coach or mentor. So you do need those people in your life. But sometimes we just, like this afternoon, I'm doing a marketing, I'm doing a what's called a ClickFunnels marketing website for a client. And there's something I just don't remember how to do. And I've just got to call a buddy and it's, there's pride and all that stuff. I'm like, dude, I can't remember how to do this. Can you help me with it? Because I don't have time to go get the YouTube and watch the tutorial day. I need someone to just call me. The schedule's too full. So it's a combination, but we need to be doing both for real.
Yeah, I'd like to add, I often use reaching out to people I know who are likely to know the answer to point me in the right direction. If it's super easy, they'll just give me the answer. And otherwise they'll point me to like where they learn it from or a book or something. Because the problem with YouTube and the internet is it doesn't really sort through the snake oil and the antiquated stuff that doesn't work anymore from the real gold. So I like to go to people if I've got a quick question, say I'm trying out this new thing, can you help point me in the right direction? And that builds rapport too.
Mm-hmm. It does. Thank you. Eileen, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, when people come to me for mentoring, thinking I might, because I've done children's books, self-published, and that I'm an expert on it, and I feel I'm not, because I'm learning all the time myself. I have to keep going back to remember what I did before. So I feel a bit of a fraud when they ask me, and I feel like, well, I can't really help you, but I try to do my best or to direct them to someone that can help, or a course or something like that, you know?
Well, just remember, they see this in you. You know, if they ask you to, and it's really important to define what that looks like. I understand the maybe feeling like a fraud, but when someone asks, "Hey, can you be my mentor?" You've got to ask, well, what does that mean? Like, what would you need? Like my mentors, I never asked them to be mentors. Like the relationships just grew, and all of a sudden I started calling them my mentor. You know, recognize if people see that in you, just recognize what God's done. I mean, it is humbling, you know, because you immediately think, oh man, you should know the mistakes I make. And you go, that's exactly what they need to know. It's exactly what they need to know is the mistakes. But I understand that. Kim, did you have a question?
Okay, can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, you know, I think what you're talking about is humility. And there is no way that any of us can know everything. I've been doing this full time for 13, 14 years now. And, you know, there's no way that we all can know everything. So I think what you're talking about is humility and also interdependence, which, you know, I was raised by a college professor and teacher, and we were taught to be independent, you know, find it out on your own, which I agree with to some degree. But I have had to learn through my life and my times, like you were speaking of, which I appreciate your story, that, you know, it's about humility brings us to interdependence. And so it's why networks like this are so valuable and why the people in our lives are so valuable too. So I appreciate your story, and I agree that we can mentor, we can coach others, but we're none of us, Eileen, are ever going to know everything. I mean, we just aren't. All we can do is help with what we have, you know, and that's a grace, you know.
Thank you so much, Kim.
Sure.
Is there another hand up? I see a. Eileen, you still got your hand up. Did you have another question?
Kathleen does.
Yep.
Okay. Who is that? Go ahead. Kathleen.
Hi,
I'm sorry.
yeah. I just wanted to make mention that when at the beginning of my journey here, I reached out to Michelle, and she looked over the first couple of chapters in the manuscript. And her feedback when she came back to me was, you know, I'm giving you this critique, but, you know, take it as it comes, that, you know, we're all learning, even though she's published books that, you know, she's still in the learning process. She gave me some books to look at, to help in different areas. And I was very thankful for that, because she didn't discourage me in the least. It was quite the opposite. She encouraged me, and she gave me things to look for and to do and to help me in my future, while she was still saying she's in the learning process too.
Mm-hmm.
So just a you know, a throw out to her for being that person.
Nice. Yeah. Good for both of you. Tom, did you have a question or a comment?
Not a question, but when I was in college, I remember a professor saying to me that knowing where to find the answer is much better than trying to memorize all the answers. And that was back in the day when we didn't have computers and digital stuff, and the books that they published for classes, if something major changed 2 months after that book was published, they couldn't do anything to get that information out except wait till the next edition. And so we were always behind. But man, today, I don't think there's anything I can search for on Google that I don't get 20 million pages, you know, of information. The problem is trying to sort out who knows what they're talking about and who doesn't. Yeah. But we are, I don't know, we're in such an exciting time with knowledge and the way it's increasing, and the smallness of the world, that our resources are just unbelievable. And we just have to use them.
Yep. Thanks, Tom. Joe, did you have a thought? Everybody let Joe know we can't hear him.
Yeah.
There we go.
There we go.
I was just going to say that in the last 2 years, I don't give exams in my classes anymore. I just gave up because they're having them memorize something is absolutely preposterous, because it's far better for students to know where to find the answer than it is to know for them actually to know the answer.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, everything is centered around knowing where to find the stuff, like what you were saying, Tom. I mean, that's the bottom line.
Yeah, Joe, thank you. When I had to take my ordination exams, so we had to take exams in Bible, theology, sacraments, church history, denominational history, and one other. The Bible exam, you didn't get to use your Bible. I mean, that was literally just, a knowledge exam. But the theology exam, you could use your Bible, because can you use it? Like, it's the theology exam was not the most important. Like, can you cite every reference? It was like, can you actually use the book in front of you? I get the difference between the two. There was a fair amount of what have you memorized in the Bible exam. I always found that one the hardest. But the theology exam was, can you actually use the thing?
Mm-hmm.
And for us, knowing where to find it and then knowing how to use it is definitely part of the growing process. Joe, what were you going to say?
I was trying to get my hand down. That's what that was.
Well, I who else? I see a couple other people have thoughts or comments or questions. Am I missing anybody? So let me tell you a story about Terry Traylor. Terry was my mentor who passed away. Terry, again, one of the most amazing men I've ever met, had started 4 churches, was literally a rocket scientist by degree before he went into seminary, but didn't come across that way at all. And Amy and I, when we got married, made a deal. I've told a couple of you this story. We literally made a deal when we got married. And that deal was that we would never, ever go into ministry because we were both preachers' kids. Now, I should have sworn off good looks, money, fame. I swore, as soon as I swore it off, you might as well have queued me up for ministry, right? And so I visited Terry's church, Redeemer Church in Raleigh, and had gone twice. And Amy hadn't gone yet. She wasn't feeling well, but Terry asked me to lunch and said, hey, I'd like for your wife I'd like to take you out and get to know you guys. And so went out to lunch, and Terry's favorite was always Mexican. So we're sitting there eating Mexican food. And Terry, being a church planter, the church he planted was a planting church. And so they had planted 4 churches in their first 3 years of existence. Just absolutely phenomenal. So we're getting to know each other back and forth. And at the end of that first lunch, again, I had met Terry only after the service. Amy had never met him at all. He said, I could see you guys planting a church. And Amy and I openly laughed at him. It was humorous to us. We busted out laughing. We're like, you don't know, man. There's just no way that's going to happen. Both our father's ministries into difficulty. It's not something we're going to do. And Terry said, I get that. Tell you what, let's do this. He goes, let's get you into seminary. So starting a master's program. And he was like, we have a partnership with the seminary. The church will pay a third. You pay a third. And the seminary forgives a third. And then that way you can try out a seminary class, and it's not too expensive. And you can take that intro to see if you like it. And man, I took the bait. I sure did. And, I was telling Amy, I was like, it would be really interesting, and neither one of us thought at all that's what we were going to do. And then, then here I am. Right. And then you graduate seminary, plant a couple of churches. And, but that was the kind of thing that made me realize that Terry was going to be my mentor, because when he passed, there were 14 men on that stage. And Terry helped launch men and women into ministry positions all over the world. But there were 14 men who had planted churches or gone into ministry because of that same conversation that he had had with me. And it was a long funeral, but no one was counting the time. But that's the kind of thing you look for in a mentor, who can see in you what you can't really see in yourself, that they're willing to say, I could see you doing this. I really could. And genuinely, sincerely, right? And Terry gave me full access to him and all his mistakes and his foibles and his marriage and his parenting and his pastoring. And then I gave him full access to me. He could, we yelled and screamed at each other at a Wendy's one day over a burger and chili, and that's okay. It's what good mentors do, is back and forth. And, we had a massive conflict that almost ended the relationship at one point in time, but we were reconciled before his passing, and I'm very thankful for that. But that's what good mentors do. They can see in you. And if you say, Gordon, I don't have those people in my life, then I'm just going to say, then just keep putting yourself in front of people. Find new people to put yourself in front of. It's not easy, but mentors make a difference. They truly, truly do. I got stories for days. Other guys, any thoughts or questions? Feedback or questions, maybe specifically how this might pertain to writing or anything along those lines? Well, we're a little less chatty than we've been. No worries. So what would be helpful, guys? I've got tons and tons that we can talk about here. Would it be helpful to shift, on a pun, to move into right now some of the practical author challenges or writing questions that you guys have for the new year, so I can kind of moderate that? Would that be helpful right now, or as I like to talk about, do you guys have marketing and practical questions along those lines that we could talk about? Do you guys have any directions that you would find a need addressed here at the beginning of the year?
I was going to say, I'm so bad at marketing, I don't even know the questions to ask.
Well, and so who said that, by the way? I couldn't see who said that.
It's Shimreed. I have my camera off.
Okay, no problem. Well, guys, and so Shimreed, I said the same thing. Marketing for books, specifically Christian books, which then drive down into your genre. Wow. I mean, each genre has its own really specific challenges. And we've got some fiction authors in here who have really produced great work, series. They've got an audience. And then we've got authors here who've sold, 10, 25 copies, which is nothing to be ashamed of. We've got folks who've written inspirational books. Mari's written a tremendous book of theology. I'm not promoting my services. You've got to get someone to help you, either in a coaching capacity or letting you focus on other things, and then hiring them to do it for you. Because otherwise, friends, the average independent author sells 100 copies. And that's typically your circle of family and friends, and then maybe a second level of that. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Nothing at all. I've got titles that have sold 20. I mean, we're all in those situations in some degree or another. But it's either a skill that you choose to go out and acquire, which you easily can. And so you can go self-learn it, and you're like, okay, there are book marketing podcasts, and there's book marketing programs, and there's books to read. And I mean, you can either go choose to get it yourself, which is 100% legit. That's how I published my first book in 2012. And I published it after reading Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek. Is anyone familiar with 4-Hour Workweek? It's a giant 1,000-page book. And my first book was for eye doctors, because I was an eye optometric consultant. And I couldn't have done it without reading his book. And so I read his book, and I figured out how to create a website on ClickBank, and I figured out KDP on my own. And, version 1 looked awful. Version 2 looked much better, because I finally then had a buddy help me format it. My first devotional came out in 2012 as well. And that was just a collection of blogs that I culled together with an awful cover and put it on Amazon. And I sold it to my family and friends and didn't go any further from that. Until then, finally, I paid for some coaching training through ClickFunnels, and then things kind of changed for me at that point in time. And I was literally doing marketing for people, but I didn't really know how to do this. I relate to your struggle, and, I've got a marketing book coming out in about 6 weeks, and this is what I do. And I'm still concerned about the launch of it. But we've either got to purposely go find the answer to our questions, YouTube, podcast, read a book, connect with people here, pay for someone to teach us, which is very legit, or pay for someone to do it. If we don't do those three things, we've just got to tell ourselves, we just have to be satisfied with however many books we're selling. But those, it's just not, marketing for this is just not like other marketing. Because one, it's for books. That's a separate type of marketing. It's your books may be targeted towards Christians. That's a different type of marketing. And then it's a different genre, because there's Christians who look down on Christian fiction. And so you got to overcome that, right? I mean, even within the Christian community, there's people who look down on different genres. We've got Christian poets here. And then, again, you overcoming that and learning how to do it. So please hear me. I'm just sharing with you. I understand the frustration, and I walk through the frustration with you. But those are the options. We either have to, go out and find the answers ourselves, pay for someone to teach us, or pay for someone to do it. So, Tom. Well, this started with Shimrit, your question about marketing and your frustration with it. So, let me share with you guys, and again, any questions or thoughts, hop in. Let me see, is there anybody in the queue with a question? No. Let me share with you guys a few of the things that have changed on social media for you guys. I've seen this affect, Nancy has spoken about it online. And you guys can tell I'm an old pastor. I just pick on whomever I see. And I know that for Mari as well. Do you guys remember the Facebook blip in October? Do you remember when Facebook and Instagram went down for many people in the world, life stopped for a few hours? And, attach whatever conspiracy theory you want to why that happened. I'm not going to address that. But something happened at that moment. And many of us have author pages here. Author page separate than your personal page. Personal page is you and your friends. An author page is like a business page or a fan page. And I encourage you to have one. I understand it. But something happened with those pages at that moment. You used to be able to get a fair amount of organic traffic by sharing on that page regularly and populating it, maybe sharing it over to your personal page. And I still recommend you doing that. But those numbers drastically dropped November and December. But what I mean is the number of people who see that page began to decrease over the course of the year. Some people thought it was going to be a temporary change. It has not changed as of yet. So essentially what that means for any of us who want to have a separate page. First of all, I do like having a separate page. I do think it establishes, if done well, establishes an air of credibility of who you are. It allows you to have a personal voice and a professional voice. Some folks don't want to have two voices, and I understand that. But what it means is you're just going to be seen by less people on that page than you used to be. It's going to be a slower build of an audience. And so what Facebook has done is saying, hey, you can still have your Facebook page for free. But if you would like more people to see it, you need to start paying for ads more and more. And so they're keeping their free, but if you'd like to grow that page, if you'd like to grow the number of people who follow you, if you'd like to grow the number of people who click on it, you're just going to have to pay for it. And so it's a shift in the business model. But for all of us, if you want to grow that page and you want more and more people to see it, you're going to have to do targeted demographic Facebook ads. So looks like this is clicked off a couple of very specific questions or comments. Landon, it's good to hear from you. What do you have to say, man?
Yeah, just real quick, piggybacking on that. That's something that I've struggled with, like for my books and brands and stuff, is making that switch from a Facebook page, because it's it's really just all about paid traffic now. You hardly see any organic engagement on Facebook pages. And to me, here's the shift that has happened over the last year or so. Instagram is the new Facebook. Instagram has come out and said they are moving to a video-based platform instead of just an image-based platform to directly compete with TikTok. And TikTok is the new Instagram. So that's the shift that's happening. Everything's going to video. And that's not saying that you guys or even myself have to move in that direction, because there's certainly opportunities, outside of that. But for social media specifically, that is where the majority of the content creation and opportunities are going. It's going to video on either Instagram or TikTok. And I know that's intimidating to myself because I don't necessarily like getting in front of the camera and creating video content. And it may be intimidating to you guys, but that's just the reality. If we're not willing to adapt and change into those environments, then we have to suffer the consequences of falling behind and getting the second or third social media platform down the ladder. So that's just my 2 cents. It's not saying that anyone has to go into those platforms. That's just what I see from a marketing perspective. Over the course of the next 2 or 3 years, that's where we are.
Thank you, Landon. Nancy, before I go to you, I want to say one thing real quick, and this will help me for next week. Next week, I want to talk about, we can always follow back to anything I've said today, but I want to talk about the new personalities of Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. I do want to go into those because they have distinctly different personalities. And you may scoff and laugh at TikTok and think it's only 13-year-olds, but there's 1 billion people on TikTok. There's not 1 billion teenagers. So we do need to talk about that for a minute. We'll talk about that next week. But
It's a question for Gordon or Landon or both of you. 2 things. One, an author friend of mine was given by Facebook an invitation to have professional mode. Now, both she and I at different times for different, well, kind of the same reasons and not necessarily matching up with that weird glitch in Facebook, but I reached a point where I had it with my author page. It was so glitchy. I was getting nothing from it. It was more than I wanted to deal with anymore. And a few months back, I just got rid of it. So I don't have that now. But so she told me about this professional mode, and I wonder what either one of you or anybody knows about that, because apparently it is by invitation, because I've looked under Meta and I've looked under all those things and I don't see how to go after it myself, but apparently you get some more of that professional on your regular page.
So, and I want to be mindful of everybody's time. It's a great question. So I want to go into, so for next week, and I will answer your question. Next week, we need to talk about Facebook, pages, professional mode, and groups. And then we'll talk about Instagram and TikTok. My opinion of Facebook professional is that it's garbage. It's not fixed yet. I know what they want to do. It's just so clunky. I think it will be the future of navigating our professional and fan pages. But at the moment, I do not like interacting with it. I find it, I'm learning it, and I probably manage, 12 accounts. I think I have 3 of them in professional right now. And it's just not my favorite. But I get what they're trying to do. They're trying to create a teams, if you will, approach. And you can invite people in to be collaborators and that kind of thing. But at the moment, it's very, very clunky. Landon's saying it's their desperate way to keep up with Instagram and TikTok. Yeah. So yeah, at the moment, if you get an invitation, if you choose to go into it, I understand that you want to learn, sort of the new approach. But just beware, managing your page is going to become clunkier while they work through the kinks of it.
Okay.
But so next week, I'm going to hit Facebook pages, professional. I want to talk about Facebook groups. I'm going to talk about that a good bit. And then I do want to go into the profiles of Instagram and TikTok. So we can tackle that. Any last thought? Did I hit everybody's thoughts or contributions? Have I missed anybody? Phil?
Gordon, yeah. I wasn't sure how to bring this up or if it even applies to authors. Lately, within the last month or so, something's piqued my interest. It's called NFTs, non-fungible tokens. And I'm sort of curious. My hands are full right now with a lot of different tracks that I'm following, but I wanted to follow up on these NFTs to see if there's a way for authors to protect ownership over what we're producing so that it doesn't get ripped off by those shammers and con artists that are out there in the world. And I'm just wondering if this is something else that, to worry about,
Yeah.
what you do as a non-NFT.
Yeah, I mean, I can touch on it briefly, maybe next week. NFTs are becoming, what's the word I'm looking for? They're almost like
Flavor of the month.
No, they're not going anywhere anytime soon. My brain is tired. When you have to do a contract, and you have to bring in person to certify that it happened, and they bring in their seal. My brain's not working anymore. It's tired. I need water.
We can table
A
it.
person who's
Notary.
a notary. Thank you. I couldn't even remember. It's becoming a new notary. Like I know people who now certify their contracts with an NFT. And so you've got a piece of paper, I got a piece of paper, but we pay for an NFT and someone possesses it and there's not a question about what's in that document. So that kind of thing is happening. And Phil, yes, people are copywriting their works with NFTs. And so we'll see how that plays out legally in the future. We don't have any examples yet of lawsuits in the NFTs. But it's becoming sort of for some people, it's becoming a notary of various things. And so I know that in the music world, I've got a buddy who's a musician who's using his contracts now with NFTs. And because he's saying, if you want an industry where someone will lie to you, it's the music industry. And I got this NFT, I can say this is what was agreed to. So yeah, I wouldn't jump into it anybody yet unless you understand the worlds of crypto and those kind of things. That's a whole other skill set. But yes, some authors are, considering maybe I need to publish my work as an NFT and I own it. And then, looks like Landon. Oh, great. Looks like Landon's got a pretty good understanding of it, Phil. So maybe you guys could connect on it. Landon's probably further ahead of me, than I am. So that's a great question and not a topic I'm an expert on, but one I might be able to land a little bit. And Landon's probably further ahead of me. Tom, you want to help land this plane?
Okay, great session, Gordon. Appreciate it very much.
Sure.
Take it easy and drink that water and get your brain back. And everybody have a wonderful day and a wonderful week, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, everybody. Great to see you.
Good one,
Bye,
Gordon.
guys.
Thank you.